introduce our next speaker now, Mr. Simon Etherton. Simon Etherton is the head of English for the British Council in the wider Europe region. He has been engaged in teaching and teacher education for over 30 years in contexts as diverse as Ukraine, India, Oman, Europe, and the South Pacific. Specific areas of professional interest include teacher knowledge, practitioner research, and initial literacy development. Mr. Etherton.
Thank you very much. I've been told it's better to stand on this side, and I shouldn't stand under the speaker. So if it looks like I'm like a caged animal, then you can blame the microphone for that. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, and congratulations to you all. You are the honorary medalists for still being here, which is great. Well done. It's been a long day, but I hope you feel that it's been an interesting day. I think that we've covered a theme today, and the conference has its theme, and I think that, of course, I have the disadvantage of coming last, in the sense that you're all a bit tired, and I'll do my best to liven you up a bit. But also a lot of the ideas that we're talking about through the day, I'm going to be talking about again today, but I'll try and do it in a reinforcing way rather than a repetitive way, maybe. So I would like to talk to you today about professional development through action and reflection. That's the title of the talk. And really it's about continuing professional development. And it's about the sort of things that Stephen was talking about this morning, what makes effective continuing professional development, but also what can we do in terms of our approach to teacher development that makes it more effective. And I'll be presenting to you today the idea of a teacher activity group that we've been piloting in many countries around the world, but which we have also been piloting here in Armenia as well. And I think that it's findings from these pilots that we're conducting and the projects we're conducting worldwide have shown that this is really a very effective model. And I hope that I'll be able to convince you of its validity today. I'd like to begin, if I can press the right button, and talk about John Dewey. We've already seen John Dewey today. Do you remember where? Super. Not only do we remember where, but we remember what he said. John Dewey, of course, an American libertarian. I mean, he's a great he was writing most of his key ideas at the turn of the previous century. So 1890 something, he was writing a book about his pedagogical creed, which was 1897, I think. And then in 1902, he sort of launched the idea of learner-centeredness and child-centeredness through his book on child in the curriculum. That's 1902, just to picture when that was. And he was mainly active in the early part of the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century. Actually died in 1950. But he's seen not just as a great educationalist, but he's also the guru of reflective practice. So really, he was the first person who really thought through teachers and teaching and reflective practice. And one of the things that he did lots and lots of things, but one of the things he did was he looked at the, what he called, I think, the disposition of teachers. And we talked in this recent online conference that we've just looked about, which the presenter was presenting about the idea of CPPD, with the extra P being personal. Yeah, and John Dewey focused on that as well, and he was saying that it's not enough just to have the practice, but you also have to have the right sort of personality, the right attitude, the right disposition. And he identified 3 characteristics, actually he identified 4, but anyway, he identified 3 main characteristics of an effective teacher. And I always, these 3 characteristics, I think, are the creed to me, because the first one is about the idea of openness. So an effective teacher has to be open to new ideas. Think through the opposite of that. What's the opposite of that? It's a closed teacher, happy with her technique, happy with her classroom routines, happy with the way that she conducts feedback, happy with the way that she asks questions, happy with her routine. She's very closed. An open teacher, on the other hand, is constantly questioning what she does. Is there a better way? Maybe I should ask some colleagues. Maybe I should read something. Maybe I should think through. Maybe I should just look at my students. Maybe I should ask my students. Is there a better way for all of these sort of routines that we go through? And I think Stephen talked about our automated, I can't remember what you said. Yes, it's like our routines in the classroom are sort of very much automated. So openness is the first one. And do you agree that openness is a useful characteristic? Are you open, do you think? Very open? Okay. All right. So I suppose you can judge how open you are by how many new things you've tried out in your classrooms recently. So that maybe is an idea. Or how many new things you've thought about or considered. Or think about some of the discussions you've had with your colleagues. And think about, have they been about new ideas, new ways of doing things? And how did you receive those? Did you say, yeah, I'm happy with how I do things? Or were you like, that's interesting. How can that work for me? So that's one, openness. The second one, responsibility. Now, this is actually a really interesting one. Because, we are teachers. And, as the Deputy Minister was telling us today, we are crucial, not just for the lives of the young people who come through our classrooms, but we're actually crucial for the overall development of our country. Because in our hands, if you like, are all the aspirations of families, parents, grandparents, communities, and the country itself. And I think an effective teacher understands and feels that responsibility. So whenever she's sitting late at night, planning a lesson or doing some marking, there's a reason for that. When she puts in some extra time to sort of find some interesting resources for the classroom, there's a reason for that. It's that feeling of responsibility. It's whenever she talks to parents and they come in and say, how is my child doing? That's the feeling. That's why I'm doing all of this. So that sense of responsibility, I think, is absolutely key. And again, if you look at the opposite of that, a teacher who is not responsible, does her job, perhaps doesn't put in a bit of extra effort, doesn't really care whether her students get good or bad marks, and so on. So you can see how it can work. But I suppose that then the question is, okay, we don't have very irresponsible teachers like that, but how responsible do you feel? Do you wake up in the morning worrying about that responsibility? Because I would argue perhaps we should. And that's the second one. And the third one is my favorite one, which is wholeheartedness. And I love the sound of that anyway, because it's wholeheartedness. It kind of sounds like you're sighing and sort of giving everything. Wholeheartedness. Sounds lovely. So wholeheartedness is really about putting everything that you have into your job. And we know when we think about effective teachers, they're the ones who are wholehearted in everything that they do. the way that they interact with the children, the enthusiasm they bring into their classroom, the enthusiasm they have or the energy they have for their lesson and so on. So that idea of wholeheartedness is another sort of characteristic of an effective teacher. So what do you think? Do you think these are three interesting ideas? Yeah? Do you disagree with them? Would you like to add another one? Yes? Okay. Yeah? Happy to share.
So I think one of the key words is love. And, love, if you are even not so much responsible, or you can be open-hearted, or sometimes you can be closed. But if you are kind and if you love your children and you love the students, you will absolutely be open. And I don't know, love is the key word, I think, in everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Passion, love. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's that comes the love that you have for your students, and the passion that you have for your profession. I think those are there, and I kind of feel that they come under the wholeheartedness thing. But it's nice to sort of further define it. So thank you very much. Great. So that was Dewey. So we're now going to focus on CPD. Now, the reason, why do you think I talked to you a little bit about Dewey before talking about CPD? Because, as Stephen sort of mentioned earlier, it's also about motivation, isn't it? Because if you are going to engage in continuing professional development, you have to have the motivation to engage in continuing professional development. Otherwise, you're not going to do it, or you'll do it in a half-hearted way. So if you have these characteristics, they also lend yourself to engaging in meaningful professional development and actually applying that professional development to what you're doing in the classroom. You see a sense or a reason for it. So here we go. What are the aims of CPD? By the way, it is continuing. I noticed that in our things you use continuous, but certainly we like to focus on continuing professional development because it's an ongoing process. So I know continuous means that as well, but we kind of put the emphasis on continuing. So what are the aims of CPD? Well, I think what the research shows us is where teachers engage in professional development, it positively impacts on the quality of teaching and learning in the classroom. Where teachers don't engage in CPD, go to the negative, they become fossilized in what they do, they become bored with what they do, their students become bored, they repeat the same lesson plans, the same things, and it negatively impacts the quality of teaching and learning. So it's a very obvious statement, but it's good to make that statement right at the very beginning. And I think that evidence from all sorts of research has shown that teacher effectiveness is the single most important part of improving the quality of teaching and learning in the classroom. Infrastructure is important, technology is important, having nice classroom furniture is important, having interactive whiteboards, these are all things that are important. Children being well fed and, being warm or cool in the classroom, these are all important. The environment's important. The textbooks are important, the curriculum's important, all of these things are important, but the most important thing is the teacher, because it's the teacher who facilitates learning. And that's why we put so much effort onto the teacher, into helping the teacher have opportunities for professional development. So there's some other writing there. I mean, the idea is that we should, the focus of professional development should completely link to what happens in the classroom, should have an impact in the classroom. And again, reinforcing what Stephen said earlier today about, he talked about impact on learning outcomes. And I think that's absolutely key as well. So that's why CPD is often on specific things. And we talked about the needs of teachers as well, and being very specific about that. So, I'm going to talk about that in a minute now. So, CPD is likely to have more sustained impact on teachers when it is driven by teachers. Now, I know Stephen went through some of these, and I'm reinforcing them and rewording them, I suppose, perhaps putting in an extra one, and maybe you could test your own knowledge and understanding, see if you can spot the difference. Do you play that game with your students, spot the difference? It's good for good life skills. Which one would it be developing, spot the difference? Critical thinking, maybe? Yeah? All right, something like that. Okay, I'm rambling. So CPD is more likely to have a positive impact when it is driven by teachers themselves. So the agenda for the CPD is not from a teacher educator, from the In-Service Institute, from academics at universities, from the Ministry of Education even. It actually should be driven by teachers. They understand the areas of their practice that they would like to focus on and think about and understand more about. Needs to be aligned with the curriculum that the teachers are actually using. There's no point coming in, opening a suitcase and doing some activities that bear no relation or relevance to what the teacher's curricula is. So I think that's really important. I think the other point is that, Stephen mentioned this earlier today as well, is that it takes place over time. It's a continuing process. It doesn't happen instantly. It's a slow process. Change is always slow, it's sometimes difficult, but it takes place over time. And the more time we spend on it, and the longer we spend on it, the more successful we're going to be. It's also, I think this was the key point that was made earlier today. It needs to be linked to what actually happens in the classroom. So classroom, Stephen talked about, it needs to be classroom-based. He was talking about classroom shock, if you remember. But that idea of it needs to be based on what the teachers are actually doing in their classroom, and it needs to link the theory to the practice needs to inform the theory, and teachers have to see that link. They have to understand how to implement ideas and be helped through that process. Encourages reflection. I think we were talking about John Dewey. I think this idea of reflection is absolutely key. When you try something new in the classroom, you have to be able to reflect on how it went, what happened. Was it successful? And, it's not good enough to go, that went well. You have to think, well, try and get some evidence for that. How do I know that went well? I mean, that's quite important. Get some evidence. How do I know that went well? And, what made it go well? What was the thing that made it go really well? And can I apply any of that to anything else that I'm doing? So that sort of level of analysis is part of reflection. It's not, that was good, thumbs up, or thumbs down. Or if it didn't go so well, again, very valuable. Reflection helps us. Well, why didn't it go so well? Is it because the whole thing was rubbish, or is it because it was that way that I did it didn't work? Maybe if I'd done it a different way, it might have worked. So we don't dismiss things out of hand. Yes, and this idea of collaboration, I think, is absolutely key. I'm a social constructivist at heart, so I believe that collaboration, working with others, talking things through, sharing ideas, sharing our pain, sharing our successes, bragging a little bit sometimes. These are all really sort of important things. We're all human beings. We don't live in isolation. And it's the same for our profession. We have friends, we have family, but we've also got colleagues, and we need to interact with them. And if you think about it, you probably spend 7, 8, some people spend more than that, hours of your day. That's at least a third of your day working on doing your work and working with colleagues. That's a large proportion of your life. And teachers need to have that process of friendship, interaction, feeling supported, and so on. And the last point is kind of interesting because this was, actually Stephen and I were talking a little bit about this, that you can have a lot of interaction and a lot of discussion and so on, but actually you need to learn things too. We have to get new input. Otherwise you're just recycling the same dirty water, if you use That's not a very good image. I'll change that image. So apologies for that. So anyway, you're not just recycling the stale air, maybe as another way of doing it, but you're actually bringing in fresh air, bringing in new ideas, and so on. So now, teacher activity groups, tags, we call them tags for short. Do you know a game called tag, by the way? Did you play this as a child? Maybe this is a very sort of English term. I'm not even going to challenge Stephen on that. But tag is basically, kids like to chase each other. But no, not tug, tag. So children like to chase each other, and someone is it, like they're the monster or something, and they run, and then if they catch someone and touch them, then you say tag, and then they become it, and everyone else runs away from them. Did you play this game? Did you play this game? Not saying you do it now. Okay, so in a way, the idea of tag is very much about touching. It's about communicating. It's about being in contact as well. But it actually stands for teacher activity groups. So the idea of a teacher activity group has come out of teacher clubs, or English clubs for teachers, which you probably are familiar with. And I was doing some work quite a few years ago in India, and we were exploring with the idea of teacher clubs and how do we support teacher clubs. And we did quite a lot of research looking at teacher clubs in India, and we've got a very vibrant scene of teacher clubs there. And what we found was that teacher clubs were great, but that it was always the same 2 or 3 teachers who did everything. And the fact that it was teachers, often the sessions they had, they made a big effort, they sat down, they met together, one teacher would bring something, they'd share it, maybe they'd discuss it and talk about it. But often the clubs lacked resources and lacked direction. So what we thought was that taking on this idea of a teacher club, this grassroots, bottom-up, sort of, which is all the strengths of a teacher club, but that we can support it, so we can provide some resources, a bank of resources that teachers can access and use. We can sort of work with a facilitator, who's not a trainer, not an educator, but a facilitator, someone who can guide the club's activities, to make sure people are coming, to make sure people are communicating, allocate roles to different people, that kind of thing. So a facilitator doesn't lead the club, but certainly facilitates the club's idea. So we experimented with all of this, and we had a couple of projects in India, and we decided that we couldn't call them clubs because they weren't that self-directed, they were supported. And so we came up with the idea of teacher activity groups. And the idea of a teacher activity group is that we support a facilitator and we provide a bank of resources. And basically that's it. That's it. And the facilitator has the responsibility for gathering together teachers from their local community, often, if it's a big school, just teachers in their school, but it could also be teachers from surrounding schools as well, working out a time to meet. From our experience now, it's always good to embed this within the Ministry of Education so that there's a time for a monthly meeting, a monthly face-to-face meeting, and a venue. Sometimes these are rotated around schools, but there needs to be a place for that. And the facilitator also, he becomes familiar with the resources, the materials, the sort of sequence of a variety of activities that they can do. So it's not always the same thing, but there's maybe a video to watch, there's an article to read, there's a debate topic or something, there's some other different activities. So there's a mixture of activities, and the facilitator understands the importance of that. So I think the key thing about the teacher activity groups is that the teachers are at the center of the CPD process. And there is an inherently social aspect to this process. And I talked about that idea of touching, but also of communicating, feeling love, sharing ideas, supporting each other in a kind of a supportive environment. And I think that's really provided through the teacher activity group. What happens is that between the face-to-face meetings, teachers stay in touch, usually through a WhatsApp group or a Facebook page. So they stay in touch with each other, they share ideas, they keep it, how are things going? So that social thing carries on. And in fact, I was talking to a colleague who had done some research into MOOCs, very interesting, and she had basically set up the idea of a MOOC group, which also sounds nice in the mouth, a MOOC group. So she had set up this idea of a MOOC group, which was, because she'd found out that teachers who very enthusiastically start to sign up and they start to study a MOOC. Do we all know what a MOOC is, by the way? Yeah, okay, good. I was just testing. Okay, so teachers who sign up to a MOOC, it's an astonishing figure. It's something like 14 or 17% finish the MOOC. It's a tiny percentage. So what she wanted to do was to actually get everyone in a group to sign up to the same MOOC at the same time. And then they supported themselves, partly through face-to-face meetings, through these tags, but also through the social media interaction as well. And she had like a 95% completion of MOOC, which is astonishing. It's amazing that you can go from 17% or 15% up to 95%. And that is only because you're getting the support of your colleagues and friends. And you're supporting, have you done it? I haven't done it. Go on, just do it. Won't take long. Look, I'll give you write this one for the first bit, or, that sort of encouragement. Expectation as well. Have you done it? Yeah, I've done it. That's there as well. So this idea that you can actually study things together is really important as well. And this links to the idea of communities of practice. Other tags have embarked on collaborative action research. So they've actually looked at the idea of researching things together and finding out, choosing a topic, deciding on the research questions, looking at the tools, working together, supporting each other, doing some reading, finding different things to read, sharing their readings, deciding on their action, their plan of action for the research, collecting their data, bringing their data together, deciding about the analysis, supporting each other through the analysis of that data, synthesizing all their data together, and then sharing the results of their research with other people at a conference like this, for example. But it's not just one person doing research, it's collaborative action research. And there's such a strength and power to that, and these kind of groups can really do that. So yes, there's a change through reflection, and there's a clear practical classroom focus, because these are teachers, they're meeting in their little communities, they all have the same schools, the same learners, the same environments, the same curriculum, they all have similar kind of issues and problems, and what they're very much focusing on is their own practice, and sharing and discussing their own practice together. Okay, so, interesting, we've done quite a lot of research on these now, and I'm going to show you in a minute all the places where we have tags, and there are now even more than that. So we've done quite a lot of research, some impact studies, evaluation studies, and what it's shown is that actually these tags lead to improvements in teachers' English language proficiency, because they're reading more, they're talking more, and if you think about teachers in quite isolated communities, when do they ever use English? It's only ever in the classroom, and it's only the language that their learners are using, and a little bit of classroom language. So this provides them with an opportunity to use a lot more language, read more, write more, talk more, listen more. Motivation. We've discovered huge rise in teachers' motivation who are on these teacher activity groups. They're more enthusiastic about their teaching. They're happier to go into work. Confidence. A lot of teachers report that they are just more confident. They're more confident about what they're doing in their classroom. They have reassurance, I suppose, from their colleagues that these things work and that they're doing good things. As Stephen talked about, that feedback being so important. So yes, the confidence is there. Their theoretical knowledge of methodology, sort of just that sort of background knowledge. You know, teachers often don't really get a chance to engage in why they're doing what they're doing, and this gives a good opportunity for that. Practical skills increase, classroom performance increase. I don't like that term, but it's true. Reflective skills, they actually get better at reflecting because they're doing it so often, talking to each other. Collaborative skills and collegiality, and their attitudes to professional development. They also get better at technology, using technology, their knowledge about technology, and their skills in technology. So, key success factors. What makes a tag successful? Firstly, needs to be supported from administration. So the school has to know about it. The director of the school, the head of department has to support it, needs support from administration. Tag facilitators are very special people. They are my heartthrobs. I love them because they are the ones who will make a difference into what they really do follow duty. They have wholeheartedness and they feel that responsibility for their tag. What was the other one? Openness, of course, yeah. Yes, we need to make sure that they have relevant and meaningful resources. What our research, our impact study has shown is that sometimes the tag groups go through the resources like a textbook, and that's actually not good, because what they should do is they should pick and choose the activities, the topics, the things that are relevant, the things that are interesting, because at the end of the day, it's like you being here over a weekend. You know, it's the things that are interesting are the things that will make you do it. Where are we up to? Focus on action plans and reflection. I think this is another key feature of an effective tag, is where at the end of their face-to-face session, the tag draws up an action plan. This is what we are all going to do before we meet again. You know, and I think they all go away with a checklist of little things that they're going to read, or they're going to try out in their classroom, or they're going to ask their learners, and things like that. And opportunities to meet and communicate with each other. What time are we finishing? I forgot to look. I've got 10 minutes. Oh, good. Okay. I'll tell you a story then. I was working with a teacher who was setting up what she called reading seminars. And so it's interesting because I have a concept, I have an idea of what a reading seminar is. And, you know, I was an academic, I was at the University of Exeter, I lectured at the University of Exeter many years ago. So I know what a reading seminar is. And for me, a reading seminar is you get a set list, article to read, or a couple of articles to read. You do your homework, you read those, you highlight bits, you come up with some questions, things that you would like to discuss. Similar to, anyway, I was at a presentation today, I was hoping to see her, where you actually read through things and you come up with sort of deep, meaningful questions to ask and so on. And then you use your face-to-face time, the seminar time, to discuss the article. And I was shocked when Lamia, that lady, told me that in her group, with her reading seminars, they read the article together. And I was like, well, that's like being at primary school, you know. But why would you want to reading aloud? So they basically take it in turns to read aloud. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's not good. That's where is the discussion? Where is the critical thinking, the analytical sort of development? Where are you sort of looking at implications and so on? You're just sitting there reading aloud? And she was like, yeah, that's what the teachers wanted to do. So I said, to my shame, I said, oh, you have to stop that. You have to go and do it properly. Don't do it like that. But she said, a couple of weeks later, I saw her, and I said, well, a month later, I said, how did it go? She said, no, we're still doing that. And I said, well, she said, please come and see, and come and talk to them, and see what it is that we're doing and how it's done. So I said, okay, fair enough. So I went along, and it was like that. They were sitting there, round in a circle. They decided they were taking in turns to read paragraphs aloud. I mean, their English level was probably B2, low B2, a high B1, something like that. But they were reading these paragraphs aloud to each other. And they were correcting each other's pronunciation. And they were correcting, and what was really interesting was they didn't mind. You know, they were like, and they would then repeat it if they got the pronouncing word. And then the reader would sometimes stop and say a word, and then sometimes stop and say, I don't know what this word is. And then some other people would say, oh, it's this. And then someone else would say, yes, it, or no, it isn't, and so on. And then when they got to the end of the paragraphs, they were sort of talking about that. So what does this say? What do we understand by this? And they were doing it. And I sat there and I thought, well, this is actually quite good. And it's what the teachers want to do, and it's how they want to do it. And my preconceptions and ideas are absolute nonsense. So anyway, that's a story that teachers, given the freedom and given the confidence, can actually work out ways of doing things for themselves that are meaningful for them. Okay, so right. So this is where we've had some other tag projects. We've now currently got, well, it's actually a lot higher than that now. It's over 50,000 teachers are involved in tags. We've been doing some interesting work in Palestine where teachers have not been studying a MOOC together, but they've been studying modules from Teaching for Success resources. So they've decided, they looked at all the modules and they said, we'd like to study this module together, and then they've decided on that, and then they go ahead and they study that module together, doing some of the work between their face-to-face meetings, using face-to-face meetings to sort of clarify things and share progress. Jordan, Egypt, Romania is an interesting one. I actually went to Transylvania. This is an English for Communities project in Transylvania, and they've got some really interesting teacher activity groups going there. India, we've still got one big one going in India with the TJAS project. My project down in South India is not going anymore, but the teacher activity groups are still going, even though the project's no longer going. And more recently now, we've launched these teacher activity groups across Moldova, Belarus, Ukraine, which is where I'm based, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia as well. So these are the sort of countries that are actively involved. We have just starting, will be in the new year, a large project in Turkey as well, where we're going to be utilizing this tag methodology. So I think that's interesting. And we're coming to the end. Before I've got one more slide I want to share, but before I finish, does anyone have any questions about teacher activity groups that they'd like to ask? Yes. Good question. Adi, how can anyone join a teacher activity group? Well, they are being piloted at the moment as part of our project that we're doing around learning hubs in isolated communities. And I was actually discussing this with the Deputy Minister yesterday, or we had a meeting yesterday, talking about this is a potential model of professional development that we can roll out. And I think she's very keen to sort of see how this pilot groups that we've got going, the success from those is going. To be perfectly honest, if you want to set up a tag, we're really happy to help because we've got loads of resources. It was very interesting in Belarus because I did some work in Belarus with 50 teachers, and it wasn't actually about tags at all. It was just some professional development. We were doing some work around professional development for them, and did a little bit of work around mentoring. And then I mentioned the idea of tags, and they said, tell us some more about that. So I went back and I did a 2-day workshop with this group of 50 teachers. And we've now got 20, 30 tags operating across Belarus in quite remote communities, using all these resources and so on. So I think sometimes when you inspire teachers, when you give them that motivation and you give them that head start, it just takes itself away. And that's one of the most valuable things about it, is that it's self-directed. It requires resources from us, but that's all electronic. I mean, we're happy to provide all the resources that are needed for that. I mean, perhaps some orientation or training for the facilitator, but some of it's fairly intuitive anyway, if you're that sort of person and got that kind of background. And then there's no other real financial investment. I mean, meeting face to face, that's good. There is one more thing, and I'm looking at the time. There is one more thing I wanted to share with you, which I think is quite important. I am the director of a regional project which is called Future English, and we're actually conducting some quite significant research into high school learners and teachers, looking at why school leavers are leaving school without the right sort of English skills to take proper advantage of employment or further education opportunities. So we're doing some research around that. We're going to be looking at students' language levels, not in Armenia, but in some other countries. But we are going to be looking at teachers' perceptions of how well they feel they're meeting the needs of their high school students, secondary school students, and so on. Part of that project, that's one part, is research, but the other part of that project is we are currently developing a new platform through the Thinking Kappa LMS, which is, we're calling it at the moment, is a virtual tag. And this will be a place, so rather than teachers communicating with each other through Facebook or WhatsApp, this will be a platform where teachers can create an e-portfolio, some of which they can share and some of which they can keep private, but that will be where they can keep voice recordings, they can put articles there, they can put their reflections, etc. But then they'll connect up to their geographical tag, so they'll have their little community there, and they'll be able to communicate with their geographical tag. If they don't meet other teachers face to face, then they can meet up with other teachers from their community. If they're in an isolated or remote or conflicted area, they can still meet up with other teachers and establish a virtual tag there. And then those tags can meet up with other tags. You've seen where they all are, and they can sort of interact with each other. So that's something that we are going to be rolling out in the new year, and that certainly, through the British Council, you'll be able to sort of access that and establish on that. And then, of course, that links fairly seamlessly to all of our Teaching for Success resources, and it also links to our Teaching English website as well, and all the things that are there. Great, so, as promised, we've just finished today, so I've talked about tags, that's finished now. And just because you're about to go away, I think it's very good for you to reflect on what we've had today. You've been to a number of different sessions. I think there are some recurring themes. You might want to do a synthesis activity, it's high-level thinking, where you synthesize the ideas from all the different talks. Or there might be something practical that you looked at today. And this also counts for tomorrow as well. So, if there is something that you've learned or heard about today, that you would like to follow up further, think how you're going to follow this up. So, first step is you need to think about understanding it more. That means you're going to have to go away and do some reading, do a bit of Googling, try and find out a little bit more information about it. Think about how can you apply this to your classroom. And then think about evaluating the difference that makes. So how are you going to find out whether it's been effective or not? And that sort of planning your monitoring and evaluation in advance is also quite useful. That's the analysis. And then think about how you're going to share that with others, next year's conference or something sooner as well. And I'm going to just finish with one little story anecdote. This is about a teacher who a good friend of mine, he heard in a conference, it was about effective feedback and so on, and there was a comment about private and public praise. So this is about giving feedback in the classroom. Do you know about private and public praise? Have you heard that concept before? Okay, so the idea is, do you praise your students in front of everyone, or do you do it quietly and privately so only they can hear it? And in the conference that he attended, the speaker said, private praise is better. And my friend said, no, it's not, can't be, because I know he was teaching primary, actually lower primary level. He says, when I teach that primary level, they like it when they're praised because, their friends all know that they've done a good job, etc. So he decided that he's going to try and find it out more about it. So he did quite a lot of reading, and he was quite surprised by what he read about all of this. Then he decided to try out different ways of doing praise in his classroom. So he kept going with some of his private places, going up to them and saying, "It's a really good piece of work," to introduce private places, going up to them and saying, "It's a really good piece of work, that's a really good thing that you said back there," that kind of thing. So he was doing all of that, and then after a bit, he sat with the children, and he said, "I've been saying good to you," because the way he was saying was like, good. He was also doing that, clap for. Do you ever do that in your classrooms, where you say, "Wonderful, clap for Ivan," like this. So then he asked his students, well, which one, these children, he asked them, which one do you prefer? And they sat down. He had a little focus group, if you want to call it that. He sat down and asked them, which one do you prefer? They said, we love it when you tell us secretly. Yeah, and he was absolutely gobsmacked. He was like, how does that work? And he asked them, why do you prefer that? And they said, because you're talking to me, and you're actually, it's my interaction with you, and you're not just sort of announcing something to the whole class. So then he actually wrote that up, because he'd actually, so he got the evidence and he wrote it up, and he actually shared it with all his colleagues, and they were all equally gobsmacked that this was the right way to go, and they're very surprised. And then they tried it out in their classrooms. So that's a good example of how something from a conference can actually have a long-lasting and meaningful change, not just on one person's practice, but on their whole community's practice as well. Great, that's it from me. Thanks for today. Thanks very much.